We all know Egeria is alive, but did you know Focalor might just be the Antichrist? This is not as far-fetched as it may seem, and as always the truth lies in looking at the name origins of characters mentioned in Genshin Lore. In this case, we need to examine Egeria, Furina, and Scylla, where we can see exactly where the Roman and Christian influences of Fontaine intersect. So without further ado, let's dive into the poisonous vision. Chapter 1. King Remus descended on his golden Fortuna. Chapter 2. A summary as to where Egeria is. Chapter 3. Who is Furina? Chapter 4. Who is the Scylla and who is the celestial Voyager? Chapter 5. What is the true fate of Fontaine? Chapter 1. And King Remus descended on his golden Fortuna. I know we all want to discuss Egeria and Furina, but we need to take a step back first because Fontaine has a cyclical fate, which the most recent trailers have been sure to remind us of. So let's take a look at what this fate is. After all, this is going to be the third time Fontaine faces annihilation by flood. So let's go back to the very beginning, before Fontaine, before Remuria, and even before King Deshret. Let's discuss the first time Fontaine flooded. This story unfolds in the Decline and Fall of Remuria, Volume 1, which describes when heavenly envoys walked the earth in a time of prosperity and centuries of immortality. In Genshin, these heavenly envoys likely mean celestial beings. But this echoes closely with the beginnings of Noah's Ark, where angels walked the earth and even created Nephilim, human-angel hybrids. Not to mention that the early generations of the Bible were extraordinarily long-lived, with Methuselah living to almost 1,000, and Noah himself was 600 when the flood began. And much like the biblical version where God punishes humanity for sinning and crafting wicked schemes, Celestia punished Fontaine for desiring more than was promised and trying to disrupt the natural order. And just like in the Bible, the punishment is days of rain followed by a massive flood. But unlike the Bible, after this flood, Fontanians appeared to have lost sentience, being no better than animals condemned for centuries until the rise of King Remus. So at some point, Fontanians lived with Celestials, sinned in some capacity, were punished, and then lost all their memories of civilization. Then King Remus descended on his golden Fortuna. So Fortuna is the ship that Risley is attempting to recreate, and while Fortuna can mean fortune as in money and wealth, it also simply means fate. Fate being a major theme for Fontaine, that Fontaine's sinking is fate, that the destruction of Remuria was fate. And in the trailers, Furina does describe a prophecy coming true as part of every character's fate. And that only fate does not deceive unless you deceive fate first. So perhaps Fortuna here is fate, and King Remus descending is fate. After all, descending is a very specific word choice for Genshin. Kusanali does tell us that descenders are beings that came from outside Tevat, a very Gnostic notion. The heavenly principles was the first, and the traveler is the final fourth. Perhaps King Remus is the second or third, and fate brought him to Remuria. After all, he appears to have been very powerful, capable of raising the Fontainians back into sentience, and wielding music as a weapon and tool. He also most likely used primordial water as a weapon, which would not be possible if he were native to the region. So perhaps we will increase the count of our known descenders in 4.2, but with that being said, let's talk about the second flood which came at the fall of Remuria. I have discussed it in length before, so simply put, Remus in some way failed to protect Remuria when it was needed. Remurian soldiers fought off the Scylla and sealed them under the great tower of Fontaine deep within the abyss, a tower right by the Opera Epiclese, most likely. And afterwards, a great flood emerged, which was said to be the true fate of Remuria, a fate King Remus had been adamant to prevent, that attempt at prevention being labeled as his greatest sin. So once more, fate and Fortuna come into play with Remuria Fontaine. Remuria sunk in the course of one day, and it threatened to be as bad as the first flood, with Remurians losing all concept of civilization. And Egeria prevented this by calling for peace, law, and justice. Egeria's realm was well praised and respected. She eventually fell in the Tanigi Hollow alongside Greater Lord Rukkhadevata during the Conrian Cataclysm. Parts of her remain in the hollow and with every Oceanid. There is no description of a great flood upon her death. It could simply be omitted, which would be odd, or one didn't happen. As is also odd considering Zhongli's warning about the death of gods. So perhaps Egeria was never truly felled, which leads us to Chapter 2, a summary as to where Egeria is. Egeria is the name of a Roman deity, a water nymph to be specific, one that was worshipped rather significantly. She is described as being a consort and consular to the second king of Rome. Her name has been used to refer to female counselors in general. She is also best known for her imparting of laws and rituals for the Roman faith, fitting for Genshin's Egeria, being the first to establish justice as a Fontainean ideal. She was also said to be associated with water, specifically with it having magic and healing properties. As I will discuss in the future, Genshin's Egeria is greatly connected to primordial water, especially to using it in ways that do not make it a weapon, perhaps indicating that primordial water can also heal. Rome and Egeria was also said to be an oracle, perhaps why Genshin's Egeria is very comfortable with her fate and does not fight against it. So a simple description, but a well-documented and worshipped water nymph, which will be important in Chapter 3. As I just mentioned, Genshin's Egeria brought law and justice in all regards, and she seems to have been a very, very kind and well-loved god. She brought peace to warring tribes, and even reformed prison life, as prior to the foundation of the Fortress of Meripede, prisoners faced a harsh life of exile, where they were forced to live among the harsh elements. When they begged for mercy, they were given the prison and likely the role of protecting the primordial waters. Now, it is also possible that she did not create the fortress, but that it was created by the Loch Knights. The Loch Knights and Oceanids formed a defense force to hide primordial water from King Remus as he was using it as a weapon. Egeria was gentle enough that she was granted access to these hidden springs, which likely helped cement her relationship with the Oceanids, and she gave the duty to the prisoners rather than leave them to a life of suffering. She also fully believed in the concept of fate and never tried to fight against it. She is the only ruler in the legacy of Remuria/Fontaine who seems to have done so, and is praised for it. She did perish in the Tanigi Hollow, but remains as a pool of water. This water seems now to be similar in appearance to primordial water. If it is, it could have never been revealed, since the pool is in Sumeru and primordial water does not affect non-Fontanians. This is likely because the primordial water affliction was a curse bestowed by Celestia alongside the first flood. I have also repeatedly discussed her connection to the Oceanids. All Oceanids carry a piece of their dead god. They also all fled Fontaine upon Egeria's death. Now, it is hinted at that Furina did not gain her position in the best way, and that some sort of treachery was involved. We have no details as to what exactly happened, but it is clear that the Oceanids have no respect for Focolo. And given that every Oceanid we have met, barring Rodea, is very kind and caring, and even Rodea simply appears to be defending herself, perhaps they have a very good reason for disliking Focolo. In fact, they describe it as an exile, implying that it was even less of a choice and something forced upon them. So Focolo did not want them in her land once she gained power. This might be because Oceanids gain more power the cleaner and purer their waters are. Perhaps primordial water makes them the most powerful. So Focolo banished them. And if Rodea of Locke is to be believed, their lives may still be in danger, as she does accuse us of being an assassin from her homeland. So with all that being said, in some capacity, Egeria still exists, in the Oceanids and in the Tanigi Hollow, and I believe she can regain her power. In fact, looking at the most recent 4.2 trailer, we see an Oceanid-like figure arise. Egeria might just be an Oceanid. After all, Venti is a wind sprite, Zhongli an Adeptus, and Nahida is a magic tree. It is perfectly acceptable in Genshin's established lore that Egeria was an Oceanid first. It would also explain how she could regain power by absorbing the waters that fell off of her. Which leads us to the last part. Now, I will discuss the Scylla in detail in Chapter 4, but for now I would like to point out that the Scylla fought King Remus because of his usage of the primordial waters as a weapon. The Loch Knights were likely loyal to the Scylla as they too protected the primordial waters, and thus it would make sense for the Scylla and Egeria to see eye to eye. We know the Scylla remains in the Abyss and that their descendants continue to fight the warriors of Remuria until both sides come to a truce. Tartaglia was welcomed into the Abyss by Skirk for awakening the celestial Voyager, whom we see at the end of Archon Quest Chapter 4, Act 4, residing within the primordial water. So it is likely that Egeria, upon her defeat, was either locked away in the primordial sea or in the Abyss, where she very likely has allies. Chapter 3. Who is Furina? Who is Furina? Well, the answer is simple. Furina is a minor Etruscan Roman deity, and probably Fontaine's Antichrist. Wait, no, I'm serious. Come back, hear me out for a minute. Let's start simply. We just discussed Egeria as a deity of Rome. Well, so was Furina, just with 2 R's, not 1. Furina, simply put, was a lesser goddess of water, probably relating to springs. Much is unknown, as she was a very minor goddess, especially when compared to the likes of Egeria, a theme Mihoyo appears to have continued in their lore. but Furina is probably most commonly associated with thieves, as her name in Latin also simply means thief, a fitting name for a false archon. It also fits her idea of tricking fate first, a fitting goal for a thief and trickster. This also directly relates back to the lore from the Tanigi Hollow that hints that Focalor did not merely inherit the throne as Kusanali did upon the death of Rukkhadevata. Instead, it hints that some treachery was evolved, the extent of which we don't know for sure. But given her name, perhaps thievery was the answer. After all, in Latin, Furina can also be associated with darkness, a theme the Oceanans have brought up before, during Secret Summer Paradise Part 3. The Shadow Theater play is revealed to be directly related to Adia's real-life story as an Oceanid. Both the thief and the girl lament at the darkness, and upon receiving light in a bottle, go on a quest to share it with others. While this thief could refer to Furina, given that the thief directly allies themselves with an Oceanid, I'm inclined to believe that this is more of a Prometheus character rebelling against the cruel darkness, which we will go into in Chapter 4. Furina is also the name of a species of venomous snakes native to Australia, and snakes are traditionally depicted as sneaky and conniving at the best of times. Now, this is not my only reasoning as to why Furina is an Antichrist figure, but I think it is still worth exploring in terms of its connection. It is not insignificant to remember that Fontaine has given us a lot of Christian imagery, with Nouvellette being based on the Leviathan, as well as the Flood, and Risley's ship on the story of Noah's Ark. So Furina being the name of a snake could relate to the concept of original sin, and the snake from the Garden of Eden. After all, Fontanians keep being punished for sinning. Could Furina be intended to take on the role of their temptress, the one who led them into ruin knowingly? So while this darkness and thievery does paint a clear picture of Furina being a lesser and wicked god, why am I relating her back to the Antichrist? Well, we need another minor tangent. Scylla, King Remus's seer. Scylla is first revealed to us by Risley when he describes the legend of King Remus and Fortuna. He describes her as a seer that turned into a golden bee, and King Remus took her with him on the Fortuna, where she remained as he built Remuria upon the waves. So let's start with the bees. Bees in Rome were associated with good speakers and morally upright people. This notion of bees depicting good morality was incorporated into Christian symbolism as well, with bees being associated with saints and even the family crests of popes. Bees, however, also symbolize the connection between the living world and the underworld of the dead. So this is fitting for several reasons. Firstly, as we discussed, King Remus could be one of our descenders, so this bee could symbolize the world outside Tevat, connecting into Tevat. It could also connect a seemingly dead Egeria to the land of the living. Or perhaps, given Egeria's connection to primordial water, Tartaglia is the current version of this bee, connecting the abyss to Tevat, and whichever entities are trapped within. But now let's get into the Scylla seers. So Scylla is the Latin name for sibyls, prophetesses, and oracles of ancient Greece. It was more of a title than a name, so there are many to parse through, and with that, many prophecies. But let's look at the two most closely related to the founding of Rome, which is the legend Fontaine seems to mostly pull from. Let's start with the minor tie-in. The cave of the Lupercal, where Romulus and Remus were raised by a wolf, was founded by a descendant of Sibyl. So there is a connection to Genshin Scylla and King Remus that is backed by outside sources. Now, this Sibyl is mostly remembered as having a book of prophecies rather than the actual prophecies themselves, so there would be little for Mihoyo to draw from here. So let us look at the Sibyl most closely connected to Genshin's lore and Roman basis. Tibur, the modern-day Tivoli, an Italian city. Tibur shared Roman culture since its city's foundation and officially became part of the empire in 90 BC, so the Tiburtine Sibyl makes most sense for a prophetess who would journey alongside a Genshin version of King Romulus. Now, this Sibyl was also the link between pagan Rome and Christian Rome, having famously prophesied the coming of Christ to Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. As with most prophecies, there are doubts to their real-world legitimacy. But we're not here to say whether or not they're true, we're here to see how and if Genshin Impact could be inspired by these outside sources. And in that regard, a direct connection between Christianity and ancient Rome is very fitting for Fontaine, as it seems to mainly pull from three influences: France, ancient Rome, and biblical sources. So besides the legends of prophesizing Rome turning Christian, Tiburtine Scylla has one more far better known and horrifying prophecy. It starts off simply. Then will arise a king of the Greeks whose name is Constans. He will be king of the Romans and the Greeks. He will be tall of stature, of handsome appearance, with shining face, well put together in all parts of his body. His reign will be ended after 112 years. Now, while it could be argued that this could relate to a few Genshin characters, I think it is safe to assume that this is most likely King Remus. It continues with, "In those days there will be great riches, and the earth will give fruit abundantly, so that a measure of wheat will be sold for a denarius, a measure of wine for a denarius, and a measure of oil for a denarius. The king will have a text before his eyes that says, 'The king of the Romans will claim the whole Christian empire for himself. He will devastate all the islands and the cities of the pagans, and will destroy all adulterous temples. He will call all pagans to baptism, and in every temple the cross of Christ will be erected.'" So this aligns a lot with what we know about Remuria, that it was a hugely prosperous area with a thriving marketplace. A king will carve an empire for himself, again, much like King Remus, and in doing so devastated the islands and cities of the pagans. This is also exactly what King Remus did. He conquered the islands to make them cities of Remuria. Remuria also refers to the non-Remurians as barbarians, a trend both Romans and the Imperial French were fond of. So if we replace Christianity with King Remus himself, who was worshipped much like an archon, and replace pagan with barbarian, simple and common swap, this is word for word what happened in Remuria. So let's skip ahead a bit, as the next sections speak more on Christian conversions of other religions and nations. So let's look at the rest in one long section here. "At that time, the prince of inequity, who will be called Antichrist, will arise from the tribe of Dan. He will be the son of perdition, the head of pride, the master of error, the fullness of malice, who will overturn the world and do wonders and great signs through dissimulation. He will delude many by magic art, so that fire will seem to come down from heaven. The years will be shortened like months, the months like weeks, the weeks like days, the days like hours, and an hour like a moment. The unclean nations that Alexander, the Indian king, shut up will arise from the north. These are the 22 realms whose number is like the sand of the sea. When the king of the Romans hears of this, he will call his army together and vanquish and utterly destroy them. After this, he will come to Jerusalem, and having put off the diadem from his head and laid aside the whole imperial garb, he will hand over the empire of the Christians to God the Father and Jesus Christ his Son. When the Roman Empire shall have ceased, then the Antichrist will be openly revealed and will sit in the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. While he is reigning, two very famous men, Elijah and Enoch, will go forth to announce the coming of the Lord. Antichrist will kill them, and after 3 days they will be raised up by the Lord. Then there will be a great persecution, such as has not been seen before, nor shall be thereafter. The Lord will shorten those days for the sake of the elect, and the Antichrist will be slain by the power of God through Michael the Archangel on the Mount of Olives." Okay, that's a lot, but let's actually dissect it down. So roughly speaking, it says there will be an Antichrist who deludes with magic, and unclean nations will rise up against Rome. The king of the Romans rises up and defeats the Antichrist and their armies, then they will hand away their crown to Christ. But when the Roman Empire fully ceases to exist, the Antichrist will sit in the high Christian house. When two famous men arise to declare that Christ is coming back, the Antichrist will kill them. But they will be raised from the dead, then a great persecution unfolds, and in the end, the Archangel Michael kills the Antichrist. So clearly this legend is a combination of Roman and Christian themes, again fitting for Fontaine. I believe that the king of the Romans best fits King Remus, as the physical description fits, and rising up to defeat invaders, then perishing, also fits the legend of King Remus. Now, it is important to remember that in some capacity, Remus's final acts were seen as a betrayal, as though he eventually went mad or evil. But he did die in a great battle that saw the end of the Scylla and left his armies fighting against their foes eternally in the abyss. But afterwards, a Christian kingdom arises, and in this prophecy, that's a good thing. Which aligns with the rise of Egeria, who had a much-loved and peaceful reign. Many of her qualities align with Christian virtues. So perhaps Egeria is the head of this Christian kingdom. So I'll discuss more about plot theories as we go, but put succinctly, I believe Focalors may be the Antichrist in this prophecy. Supposedly, she created the Oratrice that produces Indemnitium, and we know these modern machines are based off of the ones that existed at the fall of Remuria, machines and golems that were said to be powered by human souls, a fact debated but met with great fear by Remurian historians. Perhaps Focalors was alive at the fall of King Remus and in some part responsible for the decline of Remuria, and the rising up of the barbarian tribes. Neuvillette also hints that this might be possible as he describes an opera that reminds him of the modern day. The plot is, it was about a lady whose personal charm and manipulative schemes allowed her to continue to dominate the affairs of the grand mansion where she lived even after her death, like a ghost that refused to be exorcised. So perhaps this is Furina, a ghost in the modern day, but who was originally involved in the fall of Remuria. It does fit her concept of being manipulative, but well liked by her people. After all, while they do not respect her, she is a treasured mascot, and does dominate the affairs of the mansion or the opera. This especially makes sense considering the concept of the Antichrist being revealed and having a seat in a very important and religious government body, very much like playing at being an archon in the opera Epiclese. Elijah and Enoch could be Nouvelette and Risley, as both have shown an interest in saving Fontaine from the incoming flood. Now, Antichrist may be a harsh word here, so while this prophecy describes the Antichrist, capital A, I would like to point out that according to most Christian sects, there are many Antichrists, meaning simply anyone who goes against the teachings of Christ, especially in a cruel and wicked way. For example, the Catholic Church does classify Hitler as an Antichrist, lowercase a. So perhaps it's better to view Furina as an Antichrist, less the great world ender and more as a figure who goes against the very principles and foundations of Fontinian Romerian society, possibly even relishing in its downfall. Now, Arlecchino does say that Furina is just a cursed girl. Now, I will say I do not think Arlecchino has all the cards at the moment, so this statement might be false. But it could mean that Furina is the ghost Nouvelette speaks of, one that is cursed to remain and tricks others. But it could also go back to the larger hand pulling the strings behind the scenes. Perhaps Furina is this devious and evil all on her own, or perhaps the Furina we see is more of a puppet and that a real Furina operates things behind the scenes. So based on available information, Furina is a minor water deity. She is the goddess of thieves and liars. She is possibly an antichrist, so I think the main takeaways in terms of predictions are that Furina stole Egeria's position and possibly her gnosis. She is likely tempting and leading the Fontinians into destruction and into whatever the first Fontinian original sin is. She is probably older than we thought, with her age possibly being closer to Egeria's than Nahida's. She is likely going to be defeated as the villain in 4.2, so let's now look at who defeated King Remus. Chapter 4. Who is the Scylla, and who is the Celestial Voyager? I have discussed this in detail in my previous video, so this will be a quick recap for prediction purposes. The Scylla is confirmed to be the first Hydro Sovereign, with Nouvelette being his successor. It is also possible that the Scylla is the king of the sovereigns, but this is still very much up in the air. King Remus had an interesting relationship with the Scylla. King Remus originally received primordial water from the Scylla as a gift and used it in a way that was deemed a betrayal. Going off of Egeria's lore, he probably used it as a weapon, which was against the wishes of the Scylla. So after some time, the Scylla raised an army of barbarians and Vishaps and fought off the Romerian forces. Vishaps are known to be the descendants of sovereigns, so that part makes sense. The barbarians are interesting as we know the head of the Romerian army, Boethius, was a barbarian himself. With this being said, we do not know where the barbarians came from. Were they simply a group from Romeria that simply did not follow the empire? Or like real-life Rome, were they the northern Germanic tribes? Germanic in Genshin would mean Mondstadt, but northern would mean Snezhnaya. So the Scylla's forces and Boethius' forces fight, and Boethius uses the goblet he stole from King Remus to seal the Scylla with primordial water. He does so under the great tower that used sound to call sleeping sailors to safety after encountering sirens, and broke through mists as it was said to exist on the border of reality and dreams, which is fitting as Boethius seals himself and the Scylla in the abyss, along with their armies, and both sides are doomed to fight for an eternity. So a few things. Number one, there is an entrance to the abyss through primordial water, which is probably where Tartaglia is right now. If Boethius was Snezhnayan, we may be seeing a repeat of history, as Boethius was also said to have a powerful abyssal bow, the Song of Stillness. These elements would make Tartaglia our modern-day counterpart. Secondly, they fight forever until the descendants of the Scylla and Romeria make peace. This could relate back to the prophecy that the Antichrist is revealed when the last of Rome falls. Nouvelette is likely the descendant of the Scylla. All we need is another character to be the descendant of Boethius' forces, and we have our modern-day players. And if they fall, as predicted in the Sibylla prophecy, then the last of Romeria or Rome perishes, which exposes the lies of the Antichrist. In Genshin, the lies of Furina. But let's also look at the Celestial Voyager. The Celestial Voyager is likely one of two entities, either the Scylla or Egeria. In fact, we may soon deal with both, as Egeria is likely also in the primordial waters. If the Scylla still lives, then the Celestial Voyager is the Scylla. However, if the Scylla already fell, which would make sense as we already have a successor for the Hydro Sovereign, then it might be an abyssal form for Egeria, as we do see similarities to an Oceanid-like figure alongside clips of the Celestial Voyager emerging. So let's discuss Tartaglia's role in all of this. In fact, let's look back at Secret Summer Paradise Part 3 Shadowplay. If we go on a short tangent here, the thief is said to be misunderstood, as everyone accuses them of being a thief, but in reality they rob from the rich and give to the poor. Given that the role is given to Kaya, a descendant of the Abyss Order, I think this role of thief actually goes to Tartaglia. After all, robbing from the rich could be an analogy for debt collecting, and he certainly is generous with giving money back to his family and others. We could argue whether or not Zhongli is truly the poor, given that he is still in some capacity a god of wealth, but regardless, Child has been shown to be caring in some capacity, for all he is a battle-crazy maniac, so the thief role could fall to him. Given what the trailers have shown and how similarly the Celestial Voyager mimics the Oceanids in appearance and attacks, this could very well be the misunderstood thief siding with the Oceanids, which Egeria was associated with. So perhaps this is literally giving us part of the 4.2 plot. Tartaglia as our thief will side with Egeria as the lost Oceanid, and together they will bestow light upon the land, as Furina is associated with darkness. This likely means freeing Fontaine from her reign. And to recap what I mentioned before, Beast and Rome were seen as the connectors between the world of the living and the dead, which is very fitting for the role Tartaglia is playing right now. He is our connection to the Abyss and Tevat, and in this case perhaps Egeria or the Scylla and Tevat. Which means that maybe he is an oracle too, why he has been hearing voices calling him to the Celestial Voyager. Or maybe that the original Golden Bee also had a connection to the Abyss. After all, the identity of Skirk is still very much in the air. Chapter 5. What is the true fate of Fontaine? So it is clear that at one point Fontaine sinned against Celestia and was cursed, likely by primordial water. Remus descended and sought to bring about prosperity but reached too far, and his nation sank, as was fate. Egeria rose and never fought against the inevitable. She was sealed away in primordial water alongside the Scylla. Furina rose up and stole her position, possibly having been an older entity than anyone realized. Tartaglia will either free the Scylla, Egeria, or both. Furina will be revealed as a villain, and likely mass devastation will be caused while this happens, likely involving major character deaths. And then at the end, all will be saved, and the deaths will be undone. At least, that is roughly what the outside lore seems to imply. So that has been our Poisonous Vision. If you have made it to the end, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful evening or morning, and I truly wish you all the best. Thanks for watching.